प्रेक्षागृह में मौजूद देवियों और सज्जनों, मैं न लॉ का एक्सपर्ट हूँ, न रिसर्च का, न एजुकेशन का। मैं बेसिकली एक फाइनेंस का आदमी हूँ, बट लीगल प्रोसेस में डीप इंटरेस्ट होने के कारण आप लोगों के बीच कुछ शेयर कर रहा हूँ। आज इस प्रेक्षागृह में आकर मुझे वैसे ही खुशी हो रही है जैसे एक परदेसी को घर वापस आने पे होती है, because academic discourse is not very much familiar to me, so I will try to throw some ideas what I think about the topic decolonization or indigenization of education system, legal education system. So just briefly I will draw upon certain fault lines in legal education system that you will appreciate. First is colonial hangover, that you have been taught, particularly as a student of modern history in Indian freedom struggle and afterwards, that as a concept, rule of law is a borrowed concept from the West. But as a person of this country, we should try to ponder over, is it so? As a technical terminology, yes, there is no dispute that the rule of law is a concept borrowed from the West, but the essence of rule of law has always been built in Indian society. And we will discuss and elaborate how this has been. And there has been broad and elaborate discourse, particularly relating to statecraft and duty of the king, that rule of law is the supreme, even within the monarchy. Let us not forget that India has always emphasized time and again on rule of law, and broadly what we call it dharma. Dharma is not religion. Unfortunately, this term has been coined as a parallel to the religion. But dharma, what has been used in ancient texts, primarily is either in the sense of duty or a law or public order. Second fault line is, though we are aware that there are numerous resources, we throw light on legal history, but these sources are not organized in form of self-contained code. What we are practicing these days, like you are having penal code or criminal procedure code or contract law, something. These are scattered material. So drawing a holistic perspective from these scattered material is a challenge. And last is lack of first-hand knowledge and understanding of these resources. Next, please. So why there is a need for paradigm shift? First is existence of distinct legal framework in Indian society, as we talked about. In India, from the time immemorial, there have been a thrust on public order, or what I have called on dharma, and these you can find in many sources. Sutras and Dharma Shastras primarily discourses on legal issues. Dharma Sutra, if you talk, eminent among them are Gautam, Apastam, Bodhayan, and Vasisht. Smritis, if you call, that Manusmriti, Yagyavalkya Smriti, Narada Smriti, Brihaspati Smriti, and Katyayanan Smriti. These are very important form of legal discourses. In Brihaspati Smriti, it is written in 18 volumes. And so much elaborate discussions are there on civil as well as criminal law and procedure. 14 volumes are dedicated to civil law, where the last 4 volumes are dedicated to criminal law procedure and its outcome. But apart from these primarily legal texts, there are a lot of material, lot of discourses in Indian society, and these are scattered in our epics, in our literature, in our vernacular. Prominent amongst them are Ramayana, Mahabharata, Raghuvansam of Kalidas, Ramcharitmanas. So the most important perspective is, in order to develop holistic understanding, how it is possible that there will be a complete divorce from the past, and we can make education holistic. It is not possible. So this is an obvious fault line as far as legal education in India is concerned. Because development happens in a sequence. And in order to understand that sequence, we need to understand the history, the past. So I have just given a quote from one of the eminent professor dealing with the law. A lawyer without history or literature is a mechanic, a mere working mason. If he possesses some knowledge of these, he may venture to call himself an architect. The last point for paradigm shift is education policy. Next. So national education policy, I will not discuss much because it has been discussed and it will just repetition. Just third point, which Professor Amarpal Singh has also discussed, the curricula for legal studies must reflect socio-cultural context. Context that what I understand is a continuity. The law we should understand in the continuity, how a law has been evolved, how it has served the purpose of a particular society and age, and how there is a need to change. So now we will discuss some of the points, illustrations, how the dharma or law or the public order is the fulcrum of ancient Indian society. Next, please. The fulcrum of the Indian state policy or discourse is the people. So people-centric discourse is always, has been always underlined as the state policy or the epicenter of a statecraft. This has been incorporated as critical element of modern democracy, no doubt, but the resonance we can feel in our ancient scriptures also. I will give some illustration. I had just discussed that Smriti, Dharma Sutra, and Dharma Shastras are, of course, primarily resource material for legal issues. But in our Indian epics, these basic center of the statecraft has always discussed in many times. One example for Ramayana by Maharshi Valmiki. He says, Snehang Saukhyang Dayam Cheva Yadi Vajanaki Mapi Aradhanaya Lokanam Nasti Munchanti Me Vyatha. Please underline Aradhanaya Lokanam. It is for the public. So what he says, Sri Ramchandra says, ki whatever virtue I have, the kindness, the affection, the contentment, I am ready to sacrifice everything if it is in the interest of the public. Even my beloved wife, Janaki. So see, the fulcrum of a state policy is the public. So Aradhanaya Lokana. This is Valmiki Ramayana. Again, next please. If we go in Mahabharata, this aspect has been discussed even in more details. There are 3 parvas, Sabha, Anusasan, and Shanti Parva. And there are thousands of slokas, basically dealing about what is the duty of a king, what is the duty of the state, how a king should behave, how much tax he should levy, what should be the processes of taxation. These aspects have been discussed at elaborate length in Mahabharata. I have just quoted one. Bhayarta nam bhayatrata dina nugrah karnat karya karya visesagyo nityang rashtra hite rata. A king should always be consider about the person who are oppressed, deen, who are poor, who has no means to survive, and a king which has wisdom what to do and what not to do. Karya akarya visesagyo. He should be a visesagya. He should be a knowledgeable person what to do, what not to do. Nityang rashtra hite rata. And who should always be involved in the national interest. That will be a really great king. This form can be echoed. You will find the echo of the same feeling in the text of legendary poet Tulsidas. Recently, Ayodhya has been in news and a lot of Ramcharitmanas citation you must have heard. But I'm giving it a different context. Tulsidas, although talking about a story of course, Ram and Sita, we all know, but his main focus is on the people. So, what he says, the king, only that king can be considered a real popular king, or he can be relevant in the history, who is considerate about the welfare of the people. So the most important duty of the king, he has defined, jas raj priya praja dukhari, जिसके राज में प्रजा दुखी है, बहुत सिंपल बात. So nrip avasi narak adhikari. That king is basically not worthy to mention. Describing the quality of an ideal and popular king, he again mentions in Ramcharitmanas how an ideal king should be. ये तो कह दिया कि ऐसे राजा को तो नरक में भेजो, but कैसा राजा होना चाहिए अच्छा फिर? So a moot question is that. So he is elaborating, मुखिया मुख सो चाहिए. मुखिया, a king, should be like our mouth, खान पान को एक, पाले पोसे सकल अंग तुलसी सहित विवेक. Mouth, we eat from our mouth, but only mouth does not grow, otherwise our growth will be cancerous. Mouth ensures that the whole body, entire body get nourishment. So a king, a mukhya should be like that. All of us are mukhya in some or other context, so it's a great lesson for all of us. Now, this policy of statecraft, the people-centric policy, you will find echo in other affairs also, other facets of a state policy also, particularly taxation. And it can be seen in form of benevolent tax policy. I have shared a figure. The bee is sucking the honey. So in Mahabharata, it is taught that a king should collect tax from the subject like a honey collects nectar from the flower. It ensures that the existence of flower is not destroyed, and it collects as much honey as is required. So that should be the policy of taxation. The lawmakers and thinkers in ancient Indian society has time and again highlighted importance of people-friendly tax policy so that the subject can prosper. Considering that rigorous and excessive taxation will result into suffering of the people, Kautilya in his famous book, Arthashastra, lays down the philosophy of taxation as under. Pakvang pakku mibarat, phalam rajyat atmachedab bhayadanam, varjayit kopkarkam. What he basically says, कि a trained gardener, what he does, he only plucks matured fruits, not immature fruits. So a king should tax only at the right moment. So we are talking about due tax. Only a king or any state has the right to collect tax when it becomes due. So like a trained gardener, a king should collect tax from the people, and again he distinguishes between the people who avoid the tax and people who are law-avoiding. So he says the burden of maximum tax would be on those people who are avoiding law, who are not law-abiding people. So atmachhed bhayadamang varjayit kopkarkam. If you collect very harsh taxation policy, if you implement very harsh taxation policy and collect more taxes from those people who are law-abiding, it will be a disastrous for the society. That is the basically philosophy of the Kautilya in Arthashastra. Again, if you come back to Mahabharata, Mahabharata says that Satya Sandhasthito Rajya. Again, he is talking about a state and a king. Praja Palan Tatpara. A king should always be devout in the issues relating to the subject. Alubdho, मतलब लोभी नहीं होने चाहिए, वो खुद ही लोभी होगा तो बाकी स्टेट का क्या होगा. न्यायवादी, he should be judicious. Sadbhag mupajivati. 1/6 of produce he should collect as a tax, and इसी पे उसको जीना सीखना है. If the resource is scarce, then he can deploy other means, but he should not keep excessive taxation on the people as such. And we know 1/6 taxation has been as a benchmark for a long time in India, and this is the basic text from where you will get the philosophy of 1/6 taxation as agricultural produce. Again, this feeling has been echoed by great poet Kalidas in his epic Raghuvansam, when he praising Raja Dilip, he is an ideal king. How he is an ideal king? He will say, So on taxation also examples are different, but the underlying principle is that a king should be always considerate about his subject. Taxation should be reasonable, it should not be excessive. So in Raghuvansam, Kalidas says, Praja nameva bhutyartham satabhyo balim grahit sahasragun mutsruste madatyehi rasangravi. Now he is giving a different example of a sun. Sun sucks water vapors from the river, but he returned back it 1,000 times. A king should be that. A king should collect tax from the subject, but he should have a tendency to return back it to the subject 100 times, 1,000 times. So this is the basic fulcrum, basic structure of the taxation policy in ancient texts. Now, if we talk about the criminal jurisprudence, there are also umpteen number of references where you will get the source material. The basic principle laid down is basically punishment according to gravity of crime. Dand Niti has been considered as epicenter of state policy, but here we should be cautious. Dand Niti is not an arbitrary punishment. Dand Niti is also to considerate where not to punish, and when to punish, how much to punish, and when punishment should be exempted. All these facets are part of Dand Niti. So Dand has been construed not in a narrow sense, but in an extremely wider sense. Basically, it helps in establishing public order. According to Kautilya, again, I will come back to his chapter 2 in Arthashastra, volume 1, that is Varta Dandaniti Asthapna. He says, Apranito hi matsya nyaya mudbhavayati baliyan balang hi grasate dand dhara bhave. Why dand is essential, he explains. If there will not be any dand, it will be matsya nyaya. What is matsya nyaya? कि बड़ी मछली छोटी मछली को खा जाती है. So in society there will not be any public order. Who are mighty, they will only rule, they will only flourish. So what will happen to the common people? So he says that's why Dand Niti is essential. It is epicenter of a statecraft, and it is basically in order to establish the public order. Again, this Dand Niti has been explained in very, very detail in Mahabharata also. Now, if we come to Manu, he also endorses the same policy, and he says that basically Dand is the basic thing in a state. And he is, Dand is which ruling all the subjects, it protects them. When all else are sleeping, Dand keeps awake. Law is nothing but Dand itself. He says, Danda sasti praja sarva, Dand eva bhi rakshati. It is only Dand which protects the subject. Danda suptesu jagartu, Danda dharma vidur buddha. That is Manusmriti, volume 8, 14 slokas. Again, continuing to next, please. Criminal law jurisprudence. Raghuvansam again says about King Raghu, how he is making public order. It basically says that King Raghu ensures that the punishment is given according to gravity of crime, and thus he established the public order. His rule was so much comfortable to the people, as wind blow from southern direction, it is the same feeling because either it is not too hot or not too cold. He says, Sahi sarvasya lokasya yukta dandataya mana adate niti sitosnu namasvaniv dakshina. So these are the basic policy. My main point of view that any present, any relevant education system cannot have complete divorce from its past, particularly when you have a very, very great intellectual strength and the various facets of legal issues and legal education has been debated in so much details. So next to, I just throw some ideas from Kautilya Arthashastra that these are the topics which have been dealt in great detail in Kautilya Arthashastra. if I will not say you, and I have not shown you that this is Kautilya Arthashastra, you will have thought that this is a modern treaty on law. So, protection of artisans, protection of merchants, remedies against calamities, suppression of foul means, seizure of criminals, all sorts of, all facets of civil and criminal aspects have been dealt in great detail. So my point is that this is a high time we need to introspect and align our education with its historical past so that we can maintain a continuity. Thank you so much.